Families are supposed to be a safe place, the one place you run to when the world turns its back on you. But what happens when the betrayal comes not from outsiders, but from those who raised you? This is the story of how my life turned upside down when my parents made a decision that tested the very meaning of family, sacrifice, and fairness. It all began with a house, a duplex I had worked my bones to buy. I thought it was a symbol of my independence and hard work, but soon, it became the center of a storm that revealed secrets, favoritism, and greed I never imagined could exist within my own bloodline. I grew up in Port Harcourt, Nigeria, in a modest home where my parents worked hard to raise me and my elder brother, Chike. Our father was a civil servant, strict and principled, while our mother was a trader, warm but quietly biased toward Chike. From childhood, I noticed the subtle differences. Chike received the better clothes, the bigger portions, and the softer punishments. I never complained, though. I just learned early on to rely on myself. By the time I turned 32, I had built a stable career as an accountant for an oil servicing company. I wasn't rich, but I was disciplined. Every month, I saved. Every bonus, I invested. And after nearly a decade of grinding, I finally bought a duplex on the outskirts of the city. It wasn't in Banana Island or Lekki, but it was mine, my sweat, my sacrifices, my pride. The duplex was my sanctuary. I lived in one half and rented out the other, using the income to cover bills and maintain the property. To me, it was a symbol that even if life had been unfair in my childhood, I had carved out my own destiny. But destiny has a cruel way of testing us. One Sunday after church, my parents invited me and Chike over for lunch. The air smelled of pepper soup and fried plantain, but beneath the aromas, I sensed tension. My father cleared his throat as we sat around the table. "Your mother and I have been thinking," he began, eyes shifting from me to Chike. "Chike's family has been struggling. You know the rent in town is high, and with the children's school fees, things are not easy. That duplex of yours has enough space. We think it will be good if Chike and his family move in there, for free." For a moment, I thought I had misheard him. I glanced at Chike, who was staring at his plate, feigning humility but hiding a smirk. My chest tightened. "Excuse me?" I asked, voice trembling. "For free?" "Yes," my mother said quickly, almost as if she anticipated my resistance. "You have a good job, you're single, and God has blessed you with enough. Your brother has a wife and children to take care of. He needs the help more than you." Her words cut deep. So, because I wasn't married with children, my sacrifices were less important? Because I didn't have mouths to feed, my hard work could just be handed over? "Mom, Dad," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady, "I worked for that duplex. I still pay the mortgage. How do you expect me to just give it away? If Chike needs help, I can lend him money for rent, but moving in for free? That's not fair." Chike finally spoke, his tone oily with false humility. "Sister, we are family. What is the point of wealth if it cannot be shared? You're not losing anything, you will still have your job and salary. Just think of it as helping your nephew and niece have a roof over their heads." The audacity made my stomach churn. I wanted to scream, but my father's stern eyes silenced me. He had already made up his mind. "Family comes first," he declared. "We expect you to do this. It is not a request, it is your duty." That night, I drove back to my duplex with tears burning my eyes. My parents, the same people who always preached hard work and independence, were now telling me to hand over my home like it was nothing. I tossed and turned in bed, memories flooding back of every time Chike had been favored, how my father paid for his university after he squandered his first chance, how my mother sold her jewelry to bail him out when his business collapsed, while I was left to struggle for scholarships and part-time jobs. It was always the same story, Chike's needs first, mine second. The following week, my parents came to my duplex with Chike's family in tow. They walked around, admiring the place as if it already belonged to them. My nephew jumped on the sofa, my niece opened cupboards, and Chike's wife whispered about where she would put her curtains. I stood there, my fists clenched, watching strangers claim my sweat. But I wasn't ready to give in. That evening, I sat down and reviewed my property documents. Every naira I had paid, every sleepless night I had endured to secure that home flashed before me. I realized that if I allowed this, I would not only lose my house, but also my dignity. So, I made a decision. When my parents called the next day to ask when Chike could move in, I calmly told them, "I'm sorry, but the duplex is no longer available. I've rented out both sides." There was silence on the line, then my mother's voice rose like thunder. "You did what?" "Yes," I replied firmly. "I signed a lease agreement yesterday. Both tenants have already paid. It's out of my hands now." Of course, it was a lie. Only one side was rented. But I needed a shield, something to buy me time and protect my space. My father was furious. He accused me of selfishness, of dishonoring the family. Chike stopped pretending. He shouted about how ungrateful I was, how I owed him because he was my elder. The calls became endless, the pressure unbearable. Even relatives started reaching out, urging me to do the right thing. For weeks, I felt like an outcast in my own family. But just as I began to wonder if I had gone too far, something happened that changed everything. Late one night, I got a frantic call from a neighbor near my parents' house. Chike had been arrested. He had borrowed money from a local loan shark, promising he would soon have a house to use as collateral. When the loan shark came for repayment, Chike couldn't deliver. Out of desperation, he mentioned my duplex. My heart sank. My brother had been planning to use my home to secure his reckless debts, even before my parents spoke to me. That explained the urgency, the pressure, the entitled smirk. He never wanted shelter, he wanted control. When I confronted my parents with the truth, they were shaken. My mother wept silently, while my father sat with his head in his hands. The reality was undeniable. Chike had manipulated them, exploiting their favoritism to cover his own mess. But even then, they struggled to admit they were wrong. "Blood is blood," my father muttered. "He made mistakes, but he is still your brother." I looked him in the eyes, my voice steady this time. "And I am still your daughter. Why is my blood always less important?" The room fell silent. That night marked a turning point. For the first time in my life, I refused to bow to guilt or tradition. I loved my family, but I couldn't sacrifice my future for a brother who treated me like a bank account. The duplex stood untouched, my tenants safe, and for once, I felt a strange sense of power, not over my family, but over myself. But the story was far from over. Chike's arrest set off a chain of events that would drag all of us into deeper waters, forcing my parents to confront the consequences of their blind favoritism. And as I would soon discover, when family loyalties are tested by greed and betrayal, the scars can last longer than any prison sentence. Chike's arrest left a dark cloud hanging over our family. The police released him after a few days, but the shame lingered. Word spread quickly in our community, neighbors whispered, relatives shook their heads, and my parents couldn't walk to church without hearing the murmurs. At first, I thought this scandal would open their eyes. I expected them to realize how dangerous their blind loyalty to Chike had become. But instead, they doubled down. "Your brother just needs another chance," my mother pleaded one evening when she came to my duplex unannounced. She looked older than I had ever seen her, her wrapper loosely tied, her eyes swollen from crying. "If you help him now, he will change. The shame is too much for us to bear." I listened quietly, then asked, "And what about me, Mama? What about the years I carried myself without help, without asking anyone for favors? Did anyone think of me then?" She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her silence said it all. Days later, my father summoned me to the family house. He didn't ask, he ordered. "You will bail your brother out of his debts. He has already found a man willing to give him another loan, but he needs collateral. This is the time to prove you are part of this family." I felt my chest tighten. It wasn't about shelter anymore, it was about feeding Chaik's reckless habits. And this time, they wanted me to sacrifice everything I had built. No, I said firmly. I will not give him my house, and I will not sign any papers. The air grew heavy. My father's face turned red, his voice trembling with fury. So you would watch your brother rot after everything we have done for you? I stood my ground, even though my knees shook. If you think I owe you because you raised me, then remember, I never asked to be born. You chose to bring me into this world, and I've honored you with respect and obedience. But I will not destroy myself for someone who refuses to change. Chaik's wife, who had been quietly sitting in the corner, suddenly erupted. Selfish woman. You think you are better because you have money? God will judge you. I turned to her calmly. God will also judge those who waste what they are given and expect others to carry the burden. Her face twisted with rage, but I walked out before she could reply. That night, I lay awake thinking of everything. The duplex wasn't just a building, it was my lifeline, my shield against the kind of financial desperation that had trapped so many around me. If I surrendered it now, I might never recover. Weeks passed, and the family grew colder toward me. Relatives stopped calling, cousins avoided me, and even at work, I felt distracted by the storm brewing at home. But then, the unexpected happened. Chaik vanished. One morning, my mother called me in tears, saying he had left without a word. His phone was switched off, and no one knew where he had gone. His wife and children remained in the family house, confused and abandoned. I should have felt pity, but instead, I felt numb. For once, his absence brought a strange peace. There were no more demands, no more manipulations, no more pressure to hand over my life's work. But deep down, I knew it wasn't the end. Disappearing was just another of Chaik's patterns. He always ran when things got hard. And I feared that when he returned, he would bring with him an even bigger storm. 2 months passed before we heard from Chaik again. His sudden disappearance had left his wife and children stranded, relying solely on my parents' dwindling resources. My mother's shop was barely surviving, and my father's pension was stretched thin. I stayed away, though I often sent food to the children, not for Chaik's wife, not for my parents, but for those innocent kids caught in the middle. Then, one humid evening, Chaik appeared at my duplex. His hair was unkempt, his clothes creased, and his eyes restless. He looked thinner, almost broken, yet there was still that arrogance lingering in his tone. "Sister, I need your help," he said without preamble. I leaned against the doorway, arms folded. "What is it this time?" "I've found an opportunity in Abuja. A business partner who is ready to invest, but I need capital to join. If you can just release the duplex as collateral, I swear, this time will be different." I almost laughed. The audacity was exhausting. "Chaik, how many times have you said this time will be different? How many loans, how many failed businesses? Do you ever think of the damage you leave behind?" His eyes darkened. "So you will leave me to die poor? You have no heart." For the first time, I didn't raise my voice. I simply looked at him and said, "I have a heart, Chaik. That's why I won't let you drag me down with you. If you want to change, start by working with your hands, like every other man in this country. Until then, don't come here again." I shut the door. Behind it, I heard him curse, then walk away. Days later, my parents confronted me again. They accused me of being cold, of tearing the family apart. My father's words stung, "A tree does not stand alone in the forest. One day, you will need your brother." But I stood firm. If a tree leans on a rotten one, both will fall. Those words marked the final fracture. For months afterward, my relationship with my parents remained tense, almost hostile. Yet in that space, something unexpected happened. Chaik's wife, abandoned and weary, began to change. She found a small teaching job at a local school, and though the pay was meager, she managed to feed her children with dignity. She stopped calling me names. Sometimes, she even thanked me quietly for the food supplies. As for Chaik, he drifted further into the shadows. I heard rumors of him living from friend to friend, sinking deeper into debts he could never repay. He became a ghost of himself, still chasing shortcuts while the world moved on. And my parents? They eventually softened, though the scars remained. One evening, my mother came to me, her voice heavy with regret. Perhaps we were wrong, she admitted. Perhaps we wanted too much for Chaik, and in doing so, we lost sight of you. I didn't gloat, and I didn't smile. I simply nodded. Some wounds don't heal with apologies, but they stop bleeding when the truth is finally acknowledged. This story isn't about houses or debts, it's about boundaries. In African families, the burden of tradition often demands that one child, usually the most responsible, carries the weight of everyone else. But I learned that love without boundaries is not love at all, it is slavery. My duplex still stands, a symbol of hard work and resilience. But more importantly, it stands as a reminder that family loyalty should never come at the cost of self-destruction. If you're watching this, remember, saying no doesn't make you selfish. Sometimes, it's the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and for the family that needs to learn responsibility.